Okay, we got the signal. All right, we're going to call the village board meeting to order for October 13th, 2020. Begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mayor Chapman is home sick tonight. I will be chairing tonight's board meeting.
I'd like to make a motion to trustee Anderson to chair tonight's meeting.
Roll call.
Do we have a second?
Second. Second.
Get a roll call on that, please.
Brockman.
Yes.
Warren.
Yes.
DeBold.
Yes.
Luciano.
Yes.
And Kirkland. Yes.
Thank you, guys. Is there any citizens that would like to address the village board tonight? No. Is there anybody online or on the phone? About any staff that's on the phone? No?
John from the buildings is here.
John is? Okay. All right. Anybody else? All right.
This is Tracy Stahl with J&S Electric and Sign.
I'm sorry, Tracy from where?
J&S Electric and Sign.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay. All right, we'll move on to consent agenda. First item is approval of the regular meeting minutes from September 22nd, 2020. Number two is approval of the accounts payable in the amount of $569,820.17. Three is approval of a payment in the amount of $42,000 to Tria Architecture for the professional services for the new public works facility. And four is approval of a payment in the amount of $24,214 to Flyco Roofing, Inc. for work completed on the Public Works Salt Dome at Well House number 9. Is there any board member that would like to discuss the bills or any other thing on there?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
All right, roll call.
Kirkland. Yes. Luciano.
Yes.
Warren.
Yes.
DeBold.
Yes.
And Brockman.
Okay, and consent agenda is approved. No reports or proclamations. Go on to our first agenda, presentation of real estate market conditions in Will County. Doug Pryor, Vice President of Will County Center of Economic Development. Mr. Clada, would you like to introduce this man?
Sure. Doug is a familiar face, I believe. He's done quite a bit of work in this area of market research. He recently gave a presentation on it to a group online, and we're fortunate to have Doug here today to kind of give us a partial presentation of what he did that day, because that was a very comprehensive presentation at that time. So Doug, please proceed.
Thanks, Jim. I appreciate that. And just in the interest of making sure we've got this dialed in, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, so as Jim mentioned, my name is Doug Pryor. I'm with the Will County Center for Economic Development. In my role there, I am the Vice President for Development, which largely means I tend to work on the project side of the house. I also handle the research arm for our facility. So when it comes to market research and about the economy in general, we would certainly like to be someone you can go to for information on that. This is something, I gave a bit of an expanded version of this just a couple months ago. And there's a lot to talk about this year with respect to COVID and the economy and the impacts on the economy. And tonight's presentation focuses very high level on some of the real estate impacts that we're seeing thus far. Certainly, there are a lot of other things that we can talk about in that space, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have either in detail on this or in something that's not on screen. Okay, we're going to go ahead and switch to that mic. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. First, just a little bit about the Center for Economic Development. The CED is a private non-for-profit development corporation formed in 1981. We serve Will County and its 37 municipalities. Our funding mechanism is primarily from private investors and our Will County communities. And our services are free for all public and private entities with the objective of creating a robust economic future for Will County. Just very briefly, what we do and what specifically I do on the project side, our mission is the retention and expansion of existing businesses in Will County, the recruitment of new businesses, and the creation of new jobs and investment throughout the county. That's just a brief bit on the CED. I'm going to talk through just a few different market spaces tonight, again, with a focus on real estate, but certainly if you have any questions, let me know. But when we talk about the retail market, I think it's important to talk specifically about what we've seen this year. And what you're looking at here, and I should clarify, in addition to working at the CED for the last 8 or 9 years, I've been an instructor of economics and statistics, which means I don't do anything without graphs and charts. So it's a lot of graphs and charts tonight. My apologies if you're not a fan. But when we look at retail sales, I think everybody expected a very significant pullback as a response to COVID. And we see that here in March, April, May of this year. What's interesting is this is national sales and it's total sales. And for the last 3 months, year over year, retail sales have actually been up. One thing that we see over and over again is that, frankly, the American consumer is the champion of the American economy, and the consumer has really been outspending here in the last few months. More locally, I might be awfully slow on transitions here, my apologies. More locally, just looking at Shorewood in particular, Shorewood has held up incredibly well year over year on sales. So this is the second quarter sales data for Shorewood, so sales that took place in April, May, and June. And in total, comparing to the second quarter of 2019, Shorewood was only down about 3%. And to give you a comparison, the Chicago region as a whole was down about 12%, and Will County as a whole was down 8%. Shorewood outperformed both the region and some of your neighbor communities, and that's very good to see. And I think what's even more impressive is if we compare Shorewood's second quarter this year from the first quarter of this year, there was actually a big bounce in terms of total sales. And again, it speaks to the mix of uses that you have here, a little bit of your consumer base, and maybe a little bit of the fact that you've got a good concentration of home improvement stores, and those guys have been just having a spectacular year. So certainly interesting from that perspective. But of course, with retail, the big change that we're seeing is on the e-commerce side. And this is just growth year over year in e-commerce sales. And you can see the last few months of this year, we've been in the vicinity of 30% year over year growth in e-commerce. And I'm going to touch more on that a little bit later when we talk about some other properties. But it's been an extraordinary growth space. And that is absolutely putting pressure on retail space. If we look around, Chicago, the Chicago suburbs, and Will County, and we measure just growth rate of retail space over the course of the last 10 years or so, folks, this is functionally flat, right? And so when we look at retail space in the region, what we've seen is new retail growth really hasn't recovered from the last recession. And it's not specific to any geography in this region. It's been essentially the whole region. And with that, the lower growth has meant we've seen better utilization of retail space. In fact, retail vacancy, as of today, our daily vacancy rate in Will County is 5.05%. I mean, that is really low, but I think it comes with an important warning as we go forward. I do think there are definitely some clouds on the horizon with retail, and this is a look at the percentage of rents paid each month. And in March, before things got really bad, more than 90% of rents were paid on retail spaces. And over the course of the last several months, we saw a trough in April at 54%. But you can see, in the most recent data in July, we're still only at 68% of rents being paid. The reality is leases are longer term and help keep vacancy rates lower for a little while. But there is definitely pressure in this space, and we should anticipate that as we see people not paying, there's real risk of these vacancy rates rising in time. And you're going to hear me say this a couple times tonight, but with the support programs that are in place, in many ways, we're almost frozen in time, right? And people are staying in place, but there is going to be some shuffling as the year goes on and we look to next year. From retail, I'm only going to touch briefly on office because the reality is our office market, as a general rule, is relatively small. Shorewood's office market, roughly 100,000 square feet, nominal vacancy, right? You perform really well with what you have, but it's a relatively small market relative to Chicago. And in Chicago, you see office vacancy really peaked over the course of this summer, the highest since 2011. And this is Chicago office space, just quarter by quarter, looking at net absorption. In other words, comparing who left the spaces versus who occupied the spaces, what's left over. So if you have a negative number, there's more space open at the end of a quarter than occupied. And we see some really big drops in the Chicago market. And we continue to hear this narrative that companies are talking about reevaluating their spaces, talking about maybe they don't need to be in the urban core. Maybe that's true. Certainly, when we look at Chicago's sublease vacancy, we're seeing huge spikes. So this is companies within the city who have leases saying, maybe we don't need this much space in Chicago anymore, and putting some of it up for sublease. That feeds a narrative locally that maybe we're going to do better in suburban office, right? Maybe we're going to see some satellite offices out here. As we are today, our vacancy rates are pretty stable. Again, office in Will County, 7.62% as of today. Pretty modest vacancy for that space, but we're just not as big and vibrant a market as Chicago is overall. And as we look to the future, one of the focal points for us is trying to figure out what we can pick off, what we actually can do in that office space as we go forward. There are certainly a lot of folks in the real estate market suggesting the suburbs are well positioned to respond to these needs of office users. What we don't know yet is what that means. Is this going to be big, lumbering, headquarter style spaces, or is this going to be small, strategic office spaces that are taking up some of the slack in our market? So that is, for us, again, it's a market we're focused on. What we haven't seen is how this manifests itself yet in sort of a post-COVID environment. A big one for us is the housing market. Will County has been a profound leader in Illinois' housing market for years, particularly in the single-family market. But we've seen here, as we've gotten into this year, significant drop in sales. This is, I think, probably not surprising, except when you hear stories about how quickly homes sell, how well-priced homes are that sell, what's happening. And what's happening is inventory is plummeting at an even higher rate. We're in a situation now, both Will County and throughout the region, where we've seen a significant drop in listings, more than 30% drop in listings into the summer of this year. The reality is people are out wanting to buy homes. There's relatively limited inventory for them to do that. And this has become sort of a compounding issue as time has gone on, right? I heard you talking earlier today about interest rates really motivating buyers, and that's absolutely true. And sort of post-COVID world motivating buyers to maybe look at some different types of homes than they would have in the past. It's true. But at the same time, folks are seeing like, hey, there's not a lot out there. I don't know what I would move into, right? And so we're seeing this reticence to list as well. And it's really creating an incredibly tight market, and it's unfortunate because I feel like there are a lot of buyers and a lot of opportunity out there that isn't being realized because we're short inventory. And we're short inventory across the board in all manner of housing types. And the reality is we're not making it up in new builds. This is a look at Will County's total residential building permits through July of 2020. Barring some significant pickup through the end of the year, we're going to finish behind 2019. And that's a little disappointing. And I know, in the last couple of years, we've really taken a lot of lots that were ready to go off the market. Here, New Lenox, Plainfield, places that had a lot of lots where they could build have sort of filled them up. And it's been a little bit slow developing new residential subdivisions. And I think we're seeing that in our numbers. There's just, not only is there less inventory on the market, there are fewer lots that are ready to go for folks to build on. So this is something that's definitely important for us. But what's interesting is, even with these sort of muted housing numbers, Will County as a whole is well represented statewide. And Shorewood has actually punched above its weight in Will County for a really long time. So this is Shorewood's total residential building permits through 2019. And the red line is just looking at Shorewood's share of all the building permits in Will County. The peak was 2010, more than 20% of all the residential building here. Last year, Shorewood was only about 4% of all the building in Will County, but I think it's important to note that it's also only about 2% of the population. Shorewood continues to punch above its weight on housing, continues to be a very desirable housing market. But as we move on and see the market shift, I think it's going to be interesting to see how buyers ultimately begin making decisions in, again, a post-COVID world. And to give you an idea of just how big Will County is statewide, last year, Will County had more single-family building permits than any other Illinois county, and that is the first time that's happened. Will County has always, again, significantly overrepresented. We're about 5% of the state's population. Last year, we were about 14% of all the single-family homes built in the state. So when you see a number that looks, frankly, diminished relative to what we saw in the mid-2000s, understand that when you compare us to the rest of Illinois, Will County is still a very significant force in terms of new population and new housing development statewide. It's actually really impressive. But as well as we do on the single-family side, we do equally poorly on the multifamily side. So this is a comparison of Will County to the counties around us, both for the last 5 years and the last 10 years. It's not a new problem. Will County has trailed its peers in the development of multifamily housing for a long time, and it's a trend that we've seen continue. We do see multiple projects popping up around the county. Certainly Lockport built a large one last year. New Lenox is in the midst of a 200-plus unit transit-oriented development along their metro line. But it's something that, frankly, compared to our peers and neighbors, we've just significantly underperformed. And at the same time, we've seen kind of increasing demand in that space. So this is a look at home ownership rates over the course of the last 20 years. And the purple and red lines represent folks that are under 45. Purple is 35 to 45, red is under 45. And these age groups have significantly diminished over the course of the last 15 years in terms of home ownership. This translates itself into increased rental demand. Certainly these people are still out looking for homes. And we've seen the U.S. average as well, home ownership rate fall. And the reality is there has not been a recovery since the last recession. And I suppose there's a whole other argument to be made about millennials and buying decisions. But the reality is this home ownership rate has continued to fall throughout the nation and regionally. And it's something that we see a real shift in demand going forward in that space. Last market I want to touch on is just the industrial market. And as you probably know, this is something where we spend a lot of our time. Will County represents about 17% of the northeastern Illinois industrial market in terms of square footage. But in the last 5 years, we've been nearly half of the total demand in the industrial market. The reality is the railroad presence here has driven a lot of industrial to Will County over the last several years. And in particular, in 2020, we've seen a profound impact on industrial vacancies. This is a look at industrial vacancy rates just over the course of the last year. And it's fallen roughly 300 basis points countywide. It's been a huge shift. And it is largely and perhaps almost entirely e-commerce driven as the world has shifted, certainly its buying patterns toward more e-commerce. Will County has definitely been a beneficiary of that. In addition, and again, going back to that absorption number, which I know it's a little wonky, but just talking about the amount of square footage soaked up, 2020 is on pace to be a record year countywide. And the 80 corridor in particular, from Shorewood East, has been profoundly active in this space, and in particular around the intermodals. It's just been a very busy year for industrial as a general whole. And the driver for this, probably unsurprisingly, e-commerce. I won't read the quote, but this is e-commerce as a share of total U.S. sales. You can see the peak on the right-hand side. Look, that's COVID. In April, e-commerce peaked to almost 18% of total retail sales. It has diminished some, but consumer buying patterns have not returned to sort of that trend line we've seen. And it seems apparent in the way that companies are behaving that they believe that this is a long-term shift in terms of consumer buying, and it continues to increase demand, frankly, throughout the industrial market and in Will County in particular. And just to give you a concept of where we are on e-commerce nationally, roughly $800 billion in sales over the course of the last 12 months, which is a 20% jump from the prior 12 months. Total retail rose 0.2% in that time. All of the retail growth is taking place in the e-commerce sector right now. That's just the space that we live in. Looking forward, I'll be brief with my forward looking, because if there's one thing I've learned in 2020, I have no idea what's going to happen tomorrow anymore. I used to think I knew that. I don't. GDP recovery is going to begin in Q3. We were down a little more than 31% in the first quarter. Most of the GDP forecasts for the third quarter are settling between 33 and 35% increase from the second quarter. Look, these are both records in a huge way, both on the way down and on the way back up. I'm excited to see these recovery numbers. They were much more muted as recently as even a month ago. So I'm happy to see those picking up. Housing starts remain stable, but if people aren't comfortable listing homes, sales are going to stay muted. And I don't see an answer for that in the near term. Commercial challenges will mount as today's defaults become tomorrow's vacancies. That is a real challenge that we're going to face as communities and, frankly, as a nation as we move forward. Retail sales are healing, but we're still not sure what the new goals and metrics are in that space. Office space needs are going to stay under scrutiny, and what that means is I think almost every company is evaluating just how much space they need as they figure out how to remote work going forward. And then industrial is going to remain a bright spot as e-commerce grows both locally and nationally. And again, that's very, very high level. Certainly happy to talk about any of these or anything off of that you'd like to talk about. But again, I appreciate Jim for asking me out, and always happy to talk about this stuff.
All right, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Pryor? I think you brought us some interesting information about things are looking, I guess, a little better than thought, I guess.
Thanks, Doug.
No
Nice
questions? Okay. Thanks for coming out, Mr. Pryor.
Sure.
All right, we'll move on to item number 2. Consideration for approval of an ordinance granting an amendment to the conditional use for Shorewood Crossing Plan Unit Development in the Village of Shorewood, Will County, Illinois. It's Lot 6 of Shorewood Crossings. It's up for first read. Trustee Brockman and Kelly Chrissy.
Okay, thank you, Dan. I'll start this off. J&S Electric Sign came before
before us at our last meeting, wanting a little larger sign on their, can you hear me?
No.
Okay. Wanting a little larger sign on their building. And so we did hold a public hearing. Comes here with a 7-0 vote in favor. And Kelly, go ahead and take over if you'd like.
Thank you, Trustee Brockman. Good evening. So this is an amendment to the Shorewoods Crossing PUD, which was originally approved in 2000, and then subsequently amended in 2015 to permit the construction of the 2-unit commercial building that's on the northeast corner of Black and Brook Forest Avenue. And so we previously had Mattress Firm occupying the tenant space that Smoothie King is interested and working to occupy a portion of. So they're taking a 2-unit building and making it into a 3-unit space. And so Smoothie King is proposing to occupy the north half of the remaining tenant space, so right next to Noodles and Company. However, when they laid out their sign on the Brook Forest Avenue facade, they realized that there really wasn't a lot of exposure that they would get from the allowance that's provided for in the sign code. So the request before you is to amend the Shorewoods Crossing PUD to allow up to 40 square feet of wall signage for both of those tenant spaces to ensure that there is adequate exposure for the businesses that will be locating in those spaces. And we do have Tracy with J&S Sign that's on the phone in the event that there's any questions. He is the applicant for this request.
This is just a sign on the facade of the building? No other sign?
So it would permit the wall signs for the 2 tenants up to 40 square feet each.
What, my question is it on the facade of the building, or is it on a post? It's just the picture we have here, is
Oh.
the actual.
Yes,
That's correct. It's on the facade of the building, correct.
yes.
Okay.
And this will,
Allows for one in the back too, correct?
I'm sorry?
Sorry, it allows for one in the back too, correct?
So the PUD amendment does not speak to that, but I do believe that the sign code would permit that.
and it'll be the same for the next person to come into the one to the south unit.
That is correct. One amendment to address both of the tenant spaces.
No other questions or comments? Thank you, Kelly. Make a motion to approve an ordinance granting an amendment to a conditional use for Shorewood Crossings Plan Unit Development in the Village of Shorewood, Lot 6, Shorewood Crossings, and waive the second read.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Brockman.
Yes.
Warren.
Yes.
DeBold.
Yes.
Kirkland. Yes. And Luciano.
Yes.
All right, item 2 is approved. Move on to item 3, consideration for approval.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Consideration for approval of the CARES Act reimbursement submission documents. Finance Director Burkholder.
Thank you. Good evening. Presented tonight before you is the submission that we have prepared for reimbursement of expenses that the village has incurred as allowed by the CARES Act for the COVID-19 response. The total allocation to the Village of Shorewood was just above $700,000. We have previously submitted and received funding for some personal protective equipment, another items necessary for work from home, and supplies as allowable for the COVID-19 response. The Department of Treasury has since changed the rules on what kind of payroll we can submit for, which allowed us to seek reimbursement for public safety payroll expenses, which is what is presented here.
All right. Jim, I think I asked this question. I know we had to upgrade a lot of, or not upgrade, but get a lot of new laptops for when we went to remote work.
Correct.
Is that in here? I thought you,
That's already been approved, right?
That was in our first submission, and we've already received that reimbursement out of the CARES Act.
okay.
So all the items necessary from work from home, all the partitions that were installed downstairs, the extra cleaning services we've been utilizing. We've been able to get reimbursement for all of that.
All right, is there any other questions on this?
The amount left, and the 673,000 plus, what is that to be used for?
That's what we're being reimbursed for, public safety payroll expenses. So,
That's mainly PD and Public Works, isn't it?
just PD.
PD,
If we had a public health division, that would also qualify, but just police here.
And we'll use that all up, right?
Well, we've already spent it on payroll.
Right, our full allocation that we received from Will County will be fully utilized, which I think we believed was very important, that we make the best use of those dollars for the benefit of the community.
No, I just wanted to make sure, I was wondering if this is something we're paying out or something we're using to pay something we already.
Right, this
Yeah.
is a reimbursement.
Okay.
And if the motion could include authorization of the mayor to execute the document.
Right, so the document here is in your packet. It's that certification. I believe it's a 2-page form. It's something that Will County requires when we're submitting for reimbursement.
All right. Everybody get that?
Got it.
I guess we'll just do a roll call, Dave? Is that just do a roll call vote?
Yeah, just looking for a motion to approve the CARES Act reimbursement submission documents and to authorize the mayor to sign, to execute the various
Okay,
documents.
so we'll need a roll.
Make that motion.
Second.
Diane, roll call, please. And Dave, excuse me,
Yeah.
should I be voting on all this?
Yes.
Okay.
Brockman,
Yes.
Warren,
Yes.
DeBold,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Kirkland. Yes. And Luciano.
Yes.
All right. CARES Act item number 3 is approved. Item number 4 is consideration approval of the 2020 LEAF program. Noriel Noriega, Public Works Director.
Thank you. Good evening. So, as you're aware, the leaf pickup program for the village has started this week. And it goes through, barring any big snow events, all the way through the first week in December. The disposal of the leaf is part of this program that we have to, of course, obtain quotes in order for us to be able to truck the leaves to the disposal site. Compost supply contractor trucking company that we have utilized last year, worked well with staff, has agreed to hold their prices from last year, $540 per load, estimated at about 100 cubic yards loads. We're at around 13,500, barring that, of course, we did have 2 tornadoes, a big windstorm in June. It's estimated about 25 loads. We're requesting a purchase order in an amount of not to exceed 17,500, just to provide a little bit of contingencies.
Yeah, and those loads should be pretty accurate. It's not like we just started doing this, so, we've been doing this for a while, so that should be pretty darn close, so.
Yes.
Make the motion to approve the for purchase order for compost supply not to exceed 17.5.
Second.
All right, you got a second? Roll call, please.
Luciano.
Yes.
Kirkland. Yes. Anderson.
Yes.
DeBold. Warren.
Yes.
And Brockman.
Yes.
All right, item number 4, leaf pickup program and disposal is approved. Number 5, consideration of approval of the purchase and payment of John Deere compact excavator 50G from Shorewood Home and Auto in the amount not to exceed $61,000. Noriega.
Thank you again. So this has been a request for Public Works for a new piece of equipment for quite some time. As our infrastructure is aging, specifically targeting in rear yards, staff has been tasked with trying to make these repairs and continuously making our construction impact to the residents and reducing such. Yes, we do have big backhoes and big loaders, but they just don't quite fit in the rear yards. So we're looking to buy a piece of equipment that works well for us, that's just a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller in terms that we are able to work in the backyards and still do some storm sewer, sanitary, and even water main repairs that are, just so happen our infrastructure is located in the backyard. Doing a little bit of research, I do know that there were some questions regarding, how much it costs to rent some of this equipment. Looking in our local vendors, a piece of equipment that is similar to what we're asking for can range anywhere from $300 to $600 per day, $800 to $1,200 per week, and almost up to $3,000 per month. And that's also depending on availability. There is a lot of uses out there for these pieces of equipment that sometimes it's just difficult for us to obtain the pieces of equipment when we need it. We're also grateful to Commissioner Ward. He has allowed us to borrow his piece of equipment. But again, it's part of the scheduling of such that they have their own work that sometimes it's just difficult to borrow. But, thankful that we've been able to cooperate. He's been allowing us to be able to borrow this piece of equipment. So looking into this a little bit more, purchasing versus maybe purchasing a demo unit, and then even looking at lightly used pieces of equipment. You'll see here in the request, I looked into the purchasing of a brand new piece of equipment. We do have state bid prices, so there's already a significant amount of discount on a brand new piece of equipment directly from the manufacturer. These are not prices set by local distributors. This is the low bid price offered to the state bid. You'll see that the John Deere we're looking at is around $58,000. The other two that we were looking at don't quite meet what our expectations are, but very close, similar in price also. Looked at demo units. The local, our distributors close by here do not have the 50G available. There is a 60G, only for a little bit savings, but savings from the 60G model, not the $58,000. And that would be similar if you were driving by Shorewood Home and Auto. They actually have the 60G on display outside. And then finally, I started looking into lightly used pieces of equipment. And the unfortunate part is there is really not a lot of supply or used items near here where we can drive to it, take a look at it. A lot of it is located out of state. Pennsylvania, Georgia, Texas. We found one that looks nice, but by the time you look at the used price, what they're asking for, they bought it at the list price of almost $80,000. By the time the used price comes down to a savings of under what the state bid is, we're looking at a model year of 2015, 2016. Has about 1,000 to 1,500 hours of use already on it. And it is difficult for us because those items will have no warranties. We don't know the history of it. We did find some ones that, looking on a picture, we found some that looked nice in Alaska. Staff, myself, Mr. Schwartz, all volunteering. We'll go look at it. And we're looking hard also to find one in Hawaii if we can. Can't find one yet. So with that, we do have, we're recommending a purchase of new in the amount of $58,000. We're asking for not to exceed budget of $61,000.
All right, there's no add-ons on this at 58,000, right? There's no add-on pieces that we're gonna need?
Well, we're asking for not to exceed 61.
Yeah.
To be able to buy 2 additional buckets. This one the one that we spec'd out is for an 18-inch bucket. If we're allowed to buy 2 more pieces of buckets, there's one that's a heavy-duty 12-inch. Works well for street light installation when we're digging the foundation. And we're also asking to buy a 36-inch wide bucket, which helps with ditching and such through our neighborhoods without the curb streets.
Okay,
So it would be just under $61,000.
a couple of accessories, all right.
Correct.
Norhill, what's the lifespan of one of these, roughly?
We'll keep it until, I'm going to guess, around 10, 15 years. I'm a little caught off guard with that. I'm assuming with good maintenance, we'll be keeping it for a good 10 to 15 years.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No,
It was
that's
just
okay.
kind of
No, it's a fair
general.
question.
Okay.
I wanted to thank Noriel for doing the more research on it, because I had the question about leasing or buying it used, and I appreciate you going through detail and letting me be satisfied with this is the best thing to do.
No, his staff put a lot of hard work into it. They really want this piece of equipment.
It may be a little bit more, but we're buying local. And I'm glad to see that we're spending the money in town.
Yes.
All right, there's no other questions. You need a motion to approve this purchase.
I move to approve the purchase and payment of a John Deere compact excavator 50G from Shorewood Home and Auto in the amount not to exceed $61,000.
Second.
All right, Diane, we got a second. Roll call, please.
Brockman,
Yes.
Warren.
Yes.
DeBold,
Yes.
Kirkland,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
And Luciano.
Yes.
Okay, number 5 is approved not to exceed $61,000. Item number 6, consideration for approval of a contract with Homer Industries LLC in the amount not to exceed $15,000. Storm damage disposal, and we're going to waive the bid process, and this is, we talked about this 3 weeks ago, so. Oh, yeah, yeah.
Thank you again. Round 2. I apologize having to come back in front of you with the same item. After we received approval, our low quote contractor, best budget, for unknown reasons, had to retract their contract. We tried working with them. We thought it might have been a scheduling issue where they, staffing, maybe the pieces of equipment may not be locally where it's at another job, but unfortunately right now, he had to retract his quote. So giving staff the task to start looking for another couple quotes, we contacted Homer Industries, and right away, right off the bat, they had agreed to honor Best Budget's quote, original quote, for $15,000 to remove everything. And that also includes all staff and equipment necessary to remove it from our site. We no longer have to provide a crew and a piece of equipment out there and working with the crew out there.
Even better.
You're actually a little better price, but, because our staff is, and our equipment aren't going to be there, but,
We'll still monitor it.
yeah. But we're not going to have a piece, our end loader sitting there.
Correct.
All right,
Make the motion for approval of the Homer Industries not to exceed $15,000 for the storm damage cleanup. Waive the bid.
second, Dan? All right. Diane, roll call.
Luciano.
Yes.
Kirkland,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
DeBold,
Yes.
Warren.
Yes.
And Brockman.
Yes.
All right, new contract approved with Homer Tree Service. Number 7, consideration for approval of a contract with Scotco Painting in the amount of $27,700 for Village Hall column exterior and interior painting, and this is also going to possibly waive the bid process. Mr. Noriega.
Thank you again. So Village Hall, built in 2007, it's starting to show its age. As now we finish some of the column repairs out there, you can see the primer in there around the repair sites. Now it's time to finish it up with painting. You'll see in the quote will include painting of all the painting of all the columns and all the drive fits around the facade, even around the rotunda area as well. Then this will occur this month. We think we can get it in with the weather before it comes in. So we're looking and requesting that we waive the bid process and approve the contract with Scotco Painting in the amount of $27,700. This also includes some interior painting.
What do you got doing there?
Mr. Parthen had indicated that there's some touch-up that's wearing around the bathroom walls, some office space, I think something in here in the boardroom. I apologize, I didn't get all the locations, but it was just 16 hours, 2 days worth of work inside the Village Hall.
They're looking good, so.
Is the outside painting just the back part of the building, or is it
Everything.
everything? including the front?
Yes.
Nora, can you clarify?
Yes.
On the agenda, it's saying 27.7, but in the paperwork that's been submitted, you've got it referenced, and power washing and whatnot as one price is 25,780. Then you got a couple of other items listed for 4,700 on the exterior, an additional 1920. I mean, there's another five. I mean, that's combined here. We're exceeding 30,000. Can you just clarify which ones we're actually doing out all that again?
It's everything. So the number that we're looking at is the 25,780. And if you read that, it looks like it's all the dry fit and the columns included. Then the 1920 is the number for the interior. We had asked the contractor to pull the columns out just in case we run out of time. We wanted to at least get the columns. So the columns, which is already included in the 25,780 number, plus the interior.
Okay.
That's the number, that's the total cost. But we asked the contractor, just pull it just in case weather turns, we at least want the columns done.
All right, I just want to make sure I understood which ones we're looking at on it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
No other questions?
I move to approve a contract with Scotco Painting Company in the amount of $27,700 for the Village Hall column exterior, interior painting, and waive the bid process.
Second.
Diane, roll call.
Brockman. Warren.
Yes.
DeBold.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Kirkland.
Yes.
Luciano.
Yes.
Thank
All
you.
right, item number 7 is approved. Number 8, consideration for approval of a resolution adopting a non-union employee pay plan. Mr. Colada.
Thank you. So before you is a proposed pay plan for non-union employees. This is something that is called for in the personnel manual. It is something that we've been working on for some time, and I believe should be approved in order for us to establish minimums and maximums for each non-union position in the village. It's something that is important for us in order to ensure that not only our employees are equitably paid, but also that we're able to retain and recruit employees in order to continue to provide the high level of service that we do. So we have taken several steps to create this pay plan. We looked at comparable communities in order to identify what the market trend was. We also, talked internally about some of the unique positions and the requirements of those, and the department heads and I have reached a conclusion on what should be proposed in this pay plan. So this would be for the current fiscal year. Going forward, what I would like to do is to present this as a part of the budget process, so that going forward we can consider whether or not we need to make adjustments to the pay plan for each fiscal year. I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
So we'll be taking a look at it when we work on the budget after the holidays.
Correct.
I got a couple of questions here now. Now that we've had this for the weekend, a little further examination on this, all the department heads were, based off the 18 study, went up 5%, but you got a few that went up 8 and 9. Even on base pay, 9% increase, and a couple of them that went up 8% on caps. How are we getting to that when it's pulled off the market study we did, when everybody else is on 5s? And those are just on the department heads.
I believe,
Is there, I'm just curious if we missed something, or do we factor something in, or where are we going up on these?
the goal was to ensure that everyone was, existing employees were going to fit within the plan. So there are some instances in which employees currently have a wage that is higher than perhaps what the average maximum was for that position. So there could be instances where that happens, where we had to expand the range or increase the maximum in order to ensure certain people were fitting within it.
Okay, but I understand that, but everybody else's was in there, so do we have employees that are, and again, I'm just referencing on the department heads, are the only ones that I ran on numbers. I don't know if anybody else looked at anything else on specific details. Just trying to get a better feel on that. I'd actually like more time to actually break this down a little further. And I know we met with everybody, and I know everybody's had a chance to look at it, but I know when we met with the administrator, it was kind of under a shorter time frame, not having the chance to really look at it, but I'm curious where all these other ones fall too.
Sure. I mean, there are unique circumstances for each, or not for all positions, but for certain ones.
That's fine, and I apologize not get a chance to give you a call earlier today to kind of go over this a little bit further and get better clarification on a few more. But yeah, I just want to make certain everybody's aware of that, though. There are, it's not just necessarily based on 5% ones on all these other department heads. I am curious on where some of these other positions do fall and what we're changing on some scale, actually.
Right. There are certain employee or positions in which the current employee is actually below what the minimum average was. And that's one of the important things for us to do in establishing this pay plan, is to make sure that, there are instances where we really should be bringing certain employees up.
Well, then, with that said, though, if you have employees that are over the range, then you gotta, you can't take, it's kind of tough to take it away, but you can kind of keep it flat, not do anything for some time to let things kind of catch up, right?
Well, and that's a decision that we will make going forward, in terms of, do we make any future adjustments year to year to the plan? So yes, I mean, I would be happy to go over any of these individual positions with any of you in order to make sure that you're comfortable with what's proposed.
The next question I also have is there any structure in place yet in regards to how an employee can move through this pay plan? How we're going to establish, or have we started having any discussion? So, I mean, if we bring an employee in at a base pay of X amount of dollars, how does an employee earn different points or recognition, time on the job, certifications, or something, not just based on performance evaluations, but how are they going to earn more to be able to move themselves up through this pay plan?
Right. So currently, the personnel manual states that adjustments are made based upon merit. Okay. So, and that's a period after that. We certainly could consider or reconsider whether other factors should be included. Okay. We don't, for example, have longevity, okay, as a factor that could, go in here. Okay, it's different than what some of the union plans, typically have.
Sure. At this time, I'm going to make a motion to table.
I had a question. Are these the same numbers you went over with us individually 2 weeks ago?
Yes, I think there was one adjustment.
There's no change in there?
There's one change related to accounting fiscal clerk. What we did is we took off one position because we actually should consider the two positions the same, rather than making a distinction between, I think it was utility billing and accounting. Really, one position could cover both of those, so we just eliminated that one.
Thanks.
I'll second his motion.
Okay, you got a motion and a second to table. Roll call, Diane.
Brockman,
No.
no. Warren,
Yes.
DeBold,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Kirkland,
Yes.
and Luciano.
Yes.
All right. Item number 7 is tabled. 8, sorry. 8 is tabled until 2 weeks. That concludes the agenda for tonight. We'll move on to reports. I'm up first with Public Works. Got a few things here that highlights of the last 3 weeks. Our leaf pickup program started yesterday. We did get out in the morning, and then we kind of got backed off a little bit with the rain. But we went through town once, and we'll be out every day going through town. So bring the leaves out to the curb, keep behind the curb, in rows, and we'll be along to pick them up. Keep big branches and, you know, garbage out of there, please, just leaves. And we'll be going through till probably, you know, beginning of December or first snow, whichever comes first. Also, we've also been out to Public Works, has wrapped up some road patching that's in town. And then 38 of 39 tree stumps from the last big storm we had in August, we've gotten taken care of, so we're just about done with that. And I talked about 3 weeks ago, the water infiltration or water outlets, outflow from the outlets to the creeks and to the DuPage River. 68 of the outfalls have been inspected. There's been really no significant issues there. Hydrant flushing was also done in the last 3 weeks, and that's been all completed. There's been no issues there. We just like to exercise those hydrants, make sure they're all working, and that happens twice a year. And then storm sewer jetting, we did some about 450 feet, I believe it was, of jetting and river crossing. And then last but not least, we got our fleet, our snow fleet, ready to go for the snow this year, which I hope we don't get any, but I won't hope too hard because I know we're going to get it. So I have Trustee Brockman, Planning and Zoning.
Thank you, Dan. Our next meeting will be November 4th. Too early for an agenda, so that's my report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Trustee Kirkland, Parks and Rec.
Thank you. Thank you to everyone who participated in our family campout. The pavilion at Shorewood Park is temporarily closed for public use due to damage from a fallen tree. Be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to the Village Facebook, Instagram, and constant contact for Village updates and news about special events and programming. Upcoming events, we have the Shorewood Scavenger Hunt now through November 16th. Participants can continue to sign up for the hunt at any time. Complete missions at your leisure. New missions will be added throughout the hunt. Drive-through Pumpkin Patch. This is a new event, October 24th. It's taking place in lieu of Autumn Fest this year. We'll be giving out pumpkins and other fun surprises to the first 300 children between 10 a.m. and noon at Seeney's Four Season Park. And please visit the Village website for more details on any of these events. Thank you.
That scavenger hunt like a virtual thing, or you?
It is.
You look
It's
it up
like-
on your phone or something?
Yeah, you have to go in and, it's on the website, it's on Facebook and stuff, but it tells you how to go in. I forget the name of, it's Goose something. And you go in and I think you like download an app and then but you have to sign up for Shorewood specific because there's other places in the area. I think Witches Night Out has got one going on, so.
And then it kind of gives you clues and then you go look.
Right. So this one is specific to us, so. Something new to share, something fun to do, and, you know, because our other events are not happening.
Stay social distance.
Right.
Okay.
Well, you're going in your car, you know what I mean? It's like, yeah,
All right, thanks. Is that it?
that's it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Question though,
Oh.
did we set the trick-or-treating rules
I-
or time or anything?
You know what, I was thinking about that when
There
I came
was-
into, we did not.
Yeah, I think there was a memo, came out of
Yeah, from
Citizens
Jim.
Advisory.
No, Jim sent a memo out after we talked about it to Citizens Advisory.
Correct, that's right. I mean,
And he'll probably be on the next agenda, I would assume.
Yes, we can certainly do that on the next agenda.
But since we're talking about it, can you give us the hours real quick?
Right, I believe it's 4 to 7 on Halloween Day, 31st. So really not any change from what we typically do, however, that we do have some suggestions on how to do it in a safe way.
Okay. And those will be
Alternatives to
posted.
trick-or-treating and some of the traditional festivities.
Okay.
I know it probably hasn't changed much, but we usually try to get it out so people know the times, because I think there was some confusion a year or two ago with what times we were doing it.
Yeah, and I know there's confusion with this COVID thing,
Correct.
with everything, so.
Yeah, the sooner we can get that out, I think the better.
Yeah, we have published those times, however, we
Yeah.
can certainly formalize it at the next meeting.
Okay, all right.
I didn't mean to interrupt there.
Okay, thanks. Trustee Luciano, Citizens Advisory.
Thank you. After canceling several meetings of the Citizens Advisory Committee since January, we met on September 24th. 9 members were present, along with staff and residents. Roll call established a quorum, so the meeting was open. After reviewing some of the major events that occurred over the last several months, we proceeded with the discussion topics. One of the first topics we talked about, which you just mentioned, was Halloween. We passed out a article from the Herald Patch giving some tips on safe ways to trick or treat, some suggestions. We offered the committee to have some input on what they thought about trick or treating based on the fact that the coronavirus is in effect, the guidelines are in effect right now. And after discussion, they came up with some ideas, some based off of the article. But overall, and then Jim sent out a letter on this, I don't know or if he posted it. Overall, no one was in objection to safely trick-or-treating. So again, we started to talk about it then because basically what you mentioned, that we like to get it out early enough so people knew what was going on, because social media had a lot of conversation about Halloween and how people were going to have peaceful marches for Halloween and they would give candy out. So we thought it'd be a good time to discuss it and get a jump on it before, we actually had the meeting and decided exactly what to do. The next item we discussed was the COVID-19 epidemic. Jim gave some updates, and members had questions that the village administrator addressed and answered them. Lastly, we had a discussion on food trucks. Staff indicated there was no ordinance presently to address food trucks in the village. Also, no members in attendance could recall that their HOAs have any restrictions on food trucks. Questions on who would license, regulate, and inspect them were brought up. Also, questions on how they would affect local businesses and how receptive local businesses would be with the competition. In addition, questions on the distinction of those engaged in catering events or just riding around the neighborhood like ice cream trucks, how the difference would be or how we would interpret that. Members spoke about attending different parties or events where catering or these food trucks were used for catering, and none saw any problem with them to be using that capacity. So it was something that was mentioned, that we've seen on social media, people talking about it, and I thought it'd be a good subject to bring up and bring it to the board. So if staff decided to do anything or work with it further, they had a good idea of some input from, several residents. Lastly, at the meeting and under the members' report, a member had a question about truck parking on the streets in Edgewater. Chief Klima was there and he was able to answer and address the question. And he also mentioned to the members that certain types of trucks are allowed to park in the Edgewater development. Basically, that encompasses what we did at the meeting. The next meeting is October 29th. And like always, anyone interested in getting involved in the committee, if they can contact myself or any of the members, we're all listed on the website. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Well, I'm just glad to see trick or treat kind of getting back and keeping a little bit of normalcy in this world. So, well, if that's nothing else, there's nothing else, we're in line for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Second. Roll call.
Luciano?
Yes.
Kirkland?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
DeBold?
Yes.
Warren? And Brockman.
All right, we're adjourned.